Welcome, Gillian, to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm so delighted to have you as my guest today. So, would you like to introduce yourself to listeners, tell them a little bit about what you stand for, what your background is, and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Gillian French. I am currently working for Workvivo, which is an employee experience app. It actually just came out at number one in the G2 for employee apps. So super
Oh,
excited for
brilliant.
that.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's such a lovely place to work. And prior to that, I was Chief People Officer of Cubic Telecom and Chief People Officer of Car Trawler, both global Irish businesses, which is great, with two great success stories, and I
Yeah.
spent nearly close on 13 years in Car Trawler and 3 years with Cubic. So
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of my time in sort of growing, scaling technology businesses.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, I feel like I'm a granny, but I was in hotels for 7 to 8 years. I worked for the Jury Doyle Group
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
way
Yeah.
back when. Yeah. So totally loved it. Highly recommend any young people to go into hotels. You learn a lot, you work hard, but I really enjoyed my time there. So yeah, hotel background, scaling technology businesses, and now I'm working with Workvivo, which is great because I get to
Yeah.
do all this stuff as in podcasts and articles. And
Yeah,
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 so it's
yeah.
really
So
good.
interesting. But I mean, a really
Mm,
solid background in terms of people development, especially in scaling.
mm,
And it's great that you're in Irish businesses as well. You
mm,
know, it's
mm,
really kind of,
mm, mm,
I think it really stands to you. So
mm,
in terms of the conversation today, then we're saying we would have a chat about
mm,
engagement and belonging. And maybe we
mm,
start with this idea of like, we kind of touched on it before we started recording, this idea of
mm,
belonging. What does
mm.
belonging actually mean to you? Like, how would you describe that?
Think belonging for me personally is that you can be your true self, that you
Yeah.
don't have to be putting a mask on or being something that you're not. Like sometimes you go into company cultures and you're looking around to see, what do I have to do here to get on, what do I have to be. And if you have to be something different than you are, that becomes exhausting and it becomes
Yeah.
tiring. And even for others to look around, we're all behaving in the same way. I mean, how boring, you know?
Yeah.
But you do see that. You see in organizations, there's terminology like, oh, professionalism, or that's the professional way you do things, or this is how you should dress.
Hmm.
Even in our profession, like as in HR, I think nearly it's like, you wear navy, you wear tan shoes, there's this whole piece that if you're in, you have to conform.
It's like the
And
persona or something, is
yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah. And I've done it and I've taken it on. But, you know, it's really when you're yourself and can be your true self. And like I can be a little bit irreverent sometimes and a little bit
Yeah.
not wild, but,
Yeah.
I'm not. But I spent a lot of my younger years trying to contain that. And I'm quite
Yeah.
creative and I'm quite different to probably what was required at times.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that you can bring your true self and bring your strengths to the workplace.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love being around people. I get my energy from people. I don't mind if there's a situation and it's complicated with people. But what I found was I was good at that and people recognized that. But then they tried to push me to be something I wasn't, which is in data all day and doing Excel sheets and
Yeah.
decks for boards. And of course, that's a requirement when you're C-suite, but keep pushing people to things that they're not naturally or innately good at. And I do see that organizations do that, whereas they
Mm.
should really capitalize on what people love, what they get their energy from, and being their true selves.
Yeah. Well, you won't get any arguments from me. I mean, my whole ethos is around being happier at work. And interestingly, the research people who've listened to the podcast for a while will probably have heard me talking about this a lot. The research I did as part of my master's dissertation was all about this concept of fit, which I tend to use it interchangeably with belonging. I know not everyone does. Some people think like fit is like you have to mold yourself into this
Mm,
but that's what it's called in the academic literature, at least, is this, culture fit or organizational fit. And it's, for me, it was this concept of values and having your values be aligned with the values of the organization so that you didn't have to be someone else. You didn't have to pretend to be someone else. and using then your strengths and being able to match your strengths with the role that you're doing. You're talking about spreadsheets and data and that's me. That's where I light up. That's where I like come alive. I love all of that stuff, and I would happily sit, I would, I do like spending time with people as well, but I would happily sit there and just crunch through numbers for an afternoon, no problem whatsoever.
But wouldn't it be amazing if we worked together and we were co-leaders and we, shared a leadership position, and I did the bit you don't like and you do the bit that I don't like, and
that's exactly it. And I think that's how work should be. It was interesting as well what you said, Gillian, about this idea of that you're kind of, you go into an environment and everyone's sort of behaving in the same way, when actually we tend to be influenced by the environment itself, and that's why we sometimes can change, and we change ourselves to fit in that environment. But also we can influence that environment as well. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship almost, where we're going into this situation and we're influencing it and it's influencing us as well. I just find it also so interesting, because I felt I've been in those situations myself where I'm like, I definitely don't belong here. This is not, I'm not working to my strengths. I don't see myself as the same as these other people who are around me,
And it's then detrimental. It's detrimental to your health, personally, I believe, because you start not feeling yourself and not feeling well because you're trying to put a mask on, and you're, the fight or flight is probably up because you're just not feeling it, and your energy, and then your energy is impacting other people's energy, and I think energy is, such an important thing when you walk in as a leader, or if you're coming into the workplace. Keeping an eye on your energy and what you're actually presenting in the business is really important. And I know that might sound a bit fluffy, but I can see in a few years' time that people, not taking legal action, but there will be, the impact that you have on others and how you affect others around you. Like all of us know when you're in an office and someone comes in and they're slapping the briefcase down on the tin, they open the laptop and they're like, and the whole mood of the team changes,
Yes, I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. And particularly if it's a leader, it's even a bigger impact where people are like all scared and sitting there, and I think in this remote environment as well, any sort of interactions are heightened as well.
Yeah.
We need to be very mindful of the impact we have on others. And if you're not happy and you're not being your true self in work, and you're starting to I can nearly, from dealing with people over the years, I can see them change. They start in the job and they look great, and then they start getting this look on their face. There is a particular type of look that they have. They look worn out and kind of just not themselves. And some people then stay because they're like, oh, I need to do 2 years here because I can't have a jumper on my CV, or I need to do whatever. And they don't make the decision to move, and then they, impact on everyone else in the team. Because
I was just going to say, there's a few things to unpack really in what you're saying there. This idea that, that you don't really have a choice, that you're feeling stuck. But I'm also curious to know your thoughts on like what changes. So no one starts out in a role to do a crappy job. Let's face it. Like, you start out and you want to bring your best self, you want to work to your strengths, you want to do a good job, you want to impress the bosses, all of this. So what do you think changes along the way to make someone just kind of be like, oh, I don't really care that much anymore?
People are precious. And I think we've forgotten that. People are precious. And I don't mean, that's not as in we have to value our people. They are, they are a precious asset. And we bring them in and we court them and we look after them and we want them in, and they come in. And then in about 6 months, we start things and silly things like, oh, they're looking for a crowd, they're looking for this. And out of 2 or 3 conversations, you can really damage a relationship and have somebody seriously disengaged, And I see it so often with people and, around leadership tables. Oh, they think now they can get, this, that, and the other, and they're after maybe doing X, Y, and Z. And you just, in order to kind of win an argument or do something, they say and hurt the person, or also they have great people that do great work for them. And then when the chips are down and say something happens to them and they need the organization to help them out for a period of time, they sort of then back off and why are they not performing? And they're not performing. They haven't performed for the last 2 months. And you're like, well, I
Yeah.
think their mother died their last 2 months, and then they had COVID, and
Yeah.
it becomes all about the performance, and they haven't been performing, and all of those things just really damage. And people say, well, you know what, I'm just a number here, and I'm going to behave like a number.
Yeah.
So I think we have to, as leaders and people within organizations, our people are our number one asset, and we have to wrap
Yeah.
our hands around them.
Mm.
And that's not to say like precious in the other sense, where they're like, oh, I'm so precious, you can't ask me to work, and not go too extreme, because the work has to be done.
Yeah.
But what I find is that the most engaged people and the most dedicated people, it just takes one or two things to disengage them, because they're giving their all. They're doing the extra stuff in the evening. They're doing that, and you probably don't even know, and the organization doesn't even know they're doing it. And then once they're hurt once or twice, that's it. They'll pull back, and it'll take a long time to get it back, if you even do get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting point, actually, that, and I've been in, they're definitely on the receiving end. I was going to say, have I been on the giving end? I would hope not, but it could be the case that I have as well as a leader, that I've kind of had those difficult conversations that didn't go so well, and disengaged someone. But certainly I've been on the receiving end of those things where I'm just like, yeah, I don't feel like they really care. I don't feel like I'm a number. The loyalty seems to go one way. I'm putting in all these extra hours, but I'm not getting recognized for it in terms of pay, in terms of promotions, in terms of just a thank you or recognition within the team or whatever it might be. So it's really interesting that like people can be highly engaged and then they just realize. But what would you say are the steps that people, sorry, you wanted to say something?
I was just gonna, when you said there, I was like, the other thing I see as well is that highly engaged people are real givers and doers, and they go that extra mile, and they keep going that extra mile, and you need to keep an eye, because they get burnt out quite quickly if they're giving, the people that are in, and they're constantly putting their hand up for projects. You could nearly in an organization spot them. They're so dedicated to the organization, and what happens as well then is they're giving so much, and they are so reliable, that when something happens as well, emotionally, they're not able to deal with it, because they are kind of worn out. They're like, I'm missing that time with my kids, this is going on at home. And they've kind of run down the battery on themselves to be resilient enough to sort of say, well, that was just so-and-so being silly in what they said. And, actually, I do know I'm valued, and they can't rationally, because they are actually worn out as well. And I think you're seeing that with a lot of the burnout now at the moment, where people are just not out. They can't think straight. They're worn out.
And is that about proactively managing that in advance of people getting worn out and burnt out? So like, reminding them that it's okay to take a break, to take some time out in the middle of the day. If they need to get some fresh air, if they need to step away from the laptop for an hour or two, if they, and reminding them to switch off in the evenings as well. I know, like, certainly for me running my own business, the laptop is there in the evening, and the temptation, I might be watching Netflix, but the laptop can be out because it's right there, it's sitting and it's looking at me, it's in front of me, and I imagine it's the same for everyone.
I've been there, and we do have an epidemic of workaholism, and people are on all the time. And of course, you get a pat in the back, or you get the emails down, or your inbox up at the top, and now you have it down and it's all cleared off. But if you keep doing that, you're setting the pace of your own workload. So people are like, oh, she's getting through everything. She's answering emails at 11 o'clock at night, so I'll send her another one at 10 past 11. So it's really important, I think, for leaders and employees to set boundaries, because if you don't set boundaries, well, then things are going to break down, and there's going to be problems. But we do have an issue around workaholism and this sort of culture of working. Like, I was actually watching that documentary, I don't know if you saw it on Netflix, with Anna.
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah,
it was
Inventing
so
Anna.
I absolutely, Inventing Anna, and I loved it. But the thing that struck me was when the journalist was going into labour and her washers broke, and she was sitting in the thing, and then she stood up. Yeah, and she was still writing, and she went in exhausted delivering the baby, but everyone was clapping her as if that's, whereas that should not happen, bringing a baby into the world, and we should be not applauding that behaviour. We should be supporting, and should be off 10 weeks before she's having the baby, and nice and relaxed and ready to be in that role. But I think we do kind of applaud that working in that way. But then we're totally burnt out and worn out from it, you know?
Yeah. So maybe another couple of interesting points based on what you said. I love this idea of like we're setting the pace of our own workload. And I'm a big believer that leaders need to role model that type of behavior. So they should not be sending emails at, at 11 o'clock at night, because that's sending the message that that's what the expectation in the organization is, and that that's what's acceptable.
Mm.
Is it something around, and this might be a little bit controversial as well, like this idea of productivity? We're always talking about productivity. Now, my view on productivity is focusing on the stuff that's really important for the organization to move the dial, rather than the busy work that tends to happen a lot of the time, attending meetings that, and, let's face it, maybe there's meetings there that you don't really need to be at. You don't need to actually be in those meetings. And is that what it's about then? That we're it's like we want to get so much done all the time, and there's a lot of pressure to get stuff done, but maybe it's about stepping back and focusing on what's really, really important and getting those things done rather than worrying about all of the busy work.
Totally. I think everybody, firstly, no one's good at prioritizing. I've seen it in the corporate world, like no one can prioritize, and people are obsessed with having meetings, and even more so now that we're remote, but it's an absolute nightmare. But really, we have to get, as leaders, like that should be the number one, capability or skill set that every leader should have, that they can prioritize appropriately for their team. So I worked in Cardroller for 5 days a week, and then I went to Cubic. And when I was starting Cubic, I had said to the CEO, and I was saying to him, I don't know how you hired me, because I said, I'll be in at X time. I have to leave at 4:30 to collect the children. I'm only doing 4 days a week. And, and I put in really strong boundaries at the start. And I know for sure I was absolutely more productive in that role, because I was very focused. I wanted to make sure that no one said, oh, she's only doing 4 days, look at her leaving there and half more. I wanted to make sure, the work was good. So I really was, I suppose, anal about what I was doing, when I was doing and what type of work, was the most value add. And it worked. It worked really, really well for a very long time. And then when the pandemic happened, obviously being at home and the crisis itself, those boundaries waned a little bit. But when I had them in place, I was the most effective, because I was getting time with the kids. I was having lovely rests and breaks and really enjoying my weekend, my 3-day weekend, setting up the house properly. And there's lots of studies. I do work with another company called the Dialogue Code on the 4-day week. And there's a load of research to show. And one of the piloting companies that did the 4-day week, they basically put it to the team, the staff, and they said, look, we can do 4 days a week. We need you to figure it out yourselves. We obviously need to adhere to the customer requirements, and we need to, service the business and not drop in productivity. So the teams came together. They dropped every meeting that made no sense. They fixed processes that were broken, because they were all in it. Their pay wasn't going to be cut, and they were all going to have the value of having a 4-day week.
Yeah.
And it worked for everybody, because some people said, oh, well, what if you're later in your career and you don't have kids? You might like the 5 days. But older people who were closer to retirement got to spend time with their grandchildren and got to do nice weekends away with their partners. People who had kids obviously had more time to spend with their children and everyone was, well-being was way up, and productivity did not drop, and there was no issue with it. And if anything, it actually increased. So I mean, I think sometimes we just have to look at different ways of doing things. And really just change the tape. Because we've been working in this way for some time. And I personally think the pandemic has just highlighted it. But work was essentially broken before the pandemic.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm a huge believer in the 4-day week. Actually, I had Andrew Barnes, he's the global architect of the 4-day week. Wow. I had him on the podcast twice. The second time was with his partner Charlotte, talking all about the 4-day week. Firstly, before the pandemic. New
Zealand or Canada. They're lovely. I must actually listen to that one. I haven't listened to that one. I'll listen to that. That's great.
Definitely. Yeah. The first one was pre-pandemic, and the second one was during the pandemic. pandemic, so it was quite interesting. I also interviewed Lasse Reingens about the 5 hour day. So that's kind of taken those reduced hours but spreading them across the entire week. So you're working the 5 days, but you're only doing 5 hours a day. So I'm a huge believer in this, and the fact that it can actually be done, but it's like you say about putting it to the people and challenging them and seeing, well, what can they do? What meetings can they take out? How do they define productivity? What does success look like in their role? And really kind of giving the responsibility and ownership back to them. So
yeah,
it's so important, I think, to do that.
I'm actually reading the book Reinventing Organizations. I was just looking, I can't remember the author's name, but he's reinventing organizations. And, you know, he talks about the fact that when there's leaps in humankind, like they're leaps, they're not small changes. And I think that's where we are with work. And I think, you know, we're going to move to the 4-day week. There's going to be totally different roles like co-leadership, performance management is going to be thrown out. Operating, you know, organizations not being operated by fear, people first organizations rather than profit first. And I think this big leap is going to happen. And like every leap within humankind, there's some people jump straight away and some are pulled through kicking and screaming. But I think the organizations, but I think the organizations that don't and that have taken the pandemic, but they're now still trying to drag people back into the office, old policies, old ways, and think that they can operate in that way, will be in big trouble.
Yeah, no, it's like, I so agree. And I think this is the way work was going pre-pandemic, but the pandemic has given us the opportunity, and it's accelerated these trends, in my view. I love what you're saying about people either being, you know, they're either going to go through it and embrace it and like, this is what I've been waiting for, or they're going to get dragged through kicking and screaming. I suppose my concern, or maybe something worth talking about, is who are those people who are not really embracing these types of changes? These, like, this is really going to benefit everyone from what I can see. Who are the people who are not kind of getting on board with it?
One would think, but I do a little bit of coaching as well. And I have had people that have had CEOs say to them that, you know, work is number one, family and sort of social life is all on the outskirts, but your job is number one. So you need to be in your job, you know, 5 days a week in the office. And that's where your work, because if you don't have your work, you know, you have nothing else. And once all the people back in the office and operating where they can see them, and there, I'm definitely know there's lots of organizations that have said they want all their people back in, no flexibility, and you find that hard to believe in this day and age, but I know, you know, I know. And maybe there are organizations that can't operate and they do need their people in, and maybe they didn't make any money in lockdown, and that's fair enough, like restaurants, hotels, you know.
There's some roles that you certainly that you can't do remotely, but you know, for the ones that you can, absolutely. For the ones that you can, I think the opportunity is here. And I was actually speaking yesterday on a webinar on health and safety and remote working and what that means. So more from the HR perspective, from the psychological well-being of employees. And that is, you know, we were kind of talking about this idea of, if not everyone is suited to working from home. You know, you might not have a good setup. You might want to work from home because you have the flexibility and you don't want to do the commute. But equally, maybe you're not great at working from home. You're not disciplined. You get distracted, or you're lonely, or you need people to talk to bounce ideas off. You're not feeling energized because you're not around other people, whatever it might be. But it's about finding that balance, I suppose, and recognizing that it's not for everyone, and doing what's best for the individual.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, again, sitting down with the individual, sitting down with the team, working with the team. I think these days of casting down from heaven about policies and what you're going to do, it just doesn't work. And actually great ideas come out of having lots of people. So you have to be inclusive. You have to sit down and say, hey, look, this is how we are. This is the lay of the land, you know, because people don't, if you're in isolation yourself constantly, you only think, and even I find it, you know, for getting ideas, now that I'm out and chatting to people, the amount of different perspectives I'm getting on the lockdown and how it affected different people and everything that I would have never known, because I'm here with John and the kids and my mom, and they're the kind of people that I talk to, but you get such a different view.
Yeah.
But I think you have to sit down. Is the job itself, like, I mean, an office manager doesn't make much sense to be at home, but
yeah, exactly.
maybe a software developer, certainly 2 to 3 days at home, but then in with the team and out for team lunches. And look, I'm highly extroverted, and it is easy, you know, I get up in the morning, I come up to the attic, you know, you have your cup of coffee, you have your little routine, it's like your habit, you know, and then you have your cup of tea at maybe 10:30, and then you have your lunch and put on 3 washes. But you get into that and you think that's, but now I've gone into an office with Workvivo that I'm working with in Dublin, and it's wonderful to go in and have lunch and have a great laugh at lunchtime, and, you know, even just hearing people's stories and what they're doing and ideas, and, you know, I learned about new restaurants in Dublin, and like, it just, you can't put a price on that, and it's so important. And I came home, and even my husband John said, oh, you'd easy know you were in the office today, because I was in great form. It gave me great energy to be around people. So I think, yes, and even for people that maybe don't get their energy from people, I still think it's really important to go in, because I think sometimes with the pandemic and social media and the way we have been a little bit over the past 5 to 10 years is there's a lot of stuff that's focusing us just on us. So, you know, it works for me. I can collect my kids. I go up to the attic and it's grand and it suits me. But I do have a duty of care to the next generation. I'm not where I am today just because of me. Loads of leaders over the years took time to look after me. And therefore, I have to do the same. I have to go into the office and pass it on. And there'll be graduates going in who are looking to meet people and go out and have the life that I had, that I loved in my 20s. And I think the whole intergenerational sharing of experience and keeping people young and vice versa with experience is really, really important. And I think we can't just think of ourselves. We have to think about a kind of a duty of care to others as well, and not just go, well, that suits me, grand, I'm at home now, and that's the end of it, you know?
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. And in all of any tests I take, I always come out as introvert, and it surprises people, because I'm quite social. I'm one of those kind of social introverts. But that is something I really do miss from the pandemic, is being able to interact with other people in an office in that kind of setting. Like, it does make such a difference. It does give me energy, you know, so it is really important. I'd love to come back to this idea now of so, like, say if it's an individual and they're making these choices about where they want to work, and their current organisation is sort of forcing them back into the office, saying you have to be back in here, you can't be working at home anymore. But I suppose I want to get the point across that people always have a choice, and there are so many organisations out there that are offering flexibility, that are offering remote working opportunities, all of that kind of stuff. Do you want to kind of talk around a little bit around that, and get your views on you know, what you think about those kind of opportunities where people feel like they're a bit stuck and they have to stay where they are?
I think as humans, we always have to have choice. I think that is most important, and people will have choice, you know, so it is an employee's market at the moment, and people have done it for so long. So for, of course, for roles again, where it's front of house, it's front facing and all that, you need people there.
You have to be there. Yeah, absolutely.
But for roles that during the pandemic, people worked really, really hard and did their work. And I think organizations have to have an understanding that people are traumatized after the pandemic. You know, it's not something, I was again talking to, when I went into the office for Workvivo, I was chatting to one of the lads, and he said he'd worked in another company, and a few of them went out for a drink. And he said lads that were really extroverted and great fun and quiet, you know, life and soul of the party, were really, really quiet and not themselves at all.
Wow.
So I think you have to understand that some people have been affected. None of us know what went on for some people or what they were put through the pandemic. So I think it's wrong to ever just do a blanket thing and say, oh, everyone can work wherever they like, or everyone has to come into the office, or like, that's the thing with people. And when I did HR back when, you know, I was a kid, that's the one thing I came out of college with, going, Jill, one size does not fit all. Everybody's different. You're never going to implement something that everyone goes, that's brilliant. You know, everybody is different. So sitting down with people and getting their perspective and really listening. And that's why you need empathetic leaders now that can actually step into someone's shoes. where they mightn't be ready to come back now. They might still be not okay during the pandemic, and they may not want to come back. And it's a role that maybe does require them to come in 2 days a week, but it's about sitting down and maybe mapping something out with them in a collaborative way to say, how can we get to that point, or what works for you, or a half day coming in, meeting the team, and start yourself off gently.
Yeah.
But again, we have a duty of care. Sometimes I think people just go, oh, well, they were performing last week and now 3 weeks of non-performance, right? Put them on a PIP, we're too, we have no patience, and people are just different, and you have to mind your people and look after them, and they will. Like, we're only human, we're not machines, and even machines do break down, by the way, because I just had a dishwasher that broke down, and I'm heartbroken.
And now you're the dishwasher.
Don't talk to me. That's probably why I'm up here talking to you. I'll stay in the attic for a while till my husband gets them done. But we're not machines, and machines do break down. But people are, and you shouldn't just give up on a person, and we shouldn't corporate or be that it's it's not professional and we have to get someone to do this job and be so cold about it, because that's where the engagement falls off then. People says, when I was really down, I had to kind of push myself back up because I knew I was going to be disposable.
Yeah. There's a couple of points I'd love to kind of bring up. This idea you mentioned about performance management is going to go out the window, and you were saying there a second ago about, he hasn't performed for 3 weeks, let's get him on a PIP. That's my view as well. I think performance management is we're not going to have that in the future. It's going to be so different. What are your thoughts on what's that going to look like, and how will we manage performance if we don't have performance management?
Well, I think it's something different, and the way I would see it, and I think in an ideal, would be PBAs. So it's the same. My son, he comes home, he got something, an exam, and he's looking at someone else and he's like, they got this, and I'm like, don't look at that, you got this, so let's go for maybe 5 or 6% more next time. And without fail, he does, and he's delighted with himself. And it might be still a good bit less than some of the top performers in the class, but he's getting better, and he's delighted with himself, and he's improving. And, even on any teams of the top elite teams that you see out there, there's few top performers, but everyone plays their role in the team. And everyone can't be, top performer. There's always going to be someone better than you. That's what my mother always says to me anyway. So why do that to people? Why pit them against each other? Why make it competitive? Because competition really just means that a couple of people win and the majority don't win. And that's really not a nice environment. And I think that's what we've done for a long period of time as well. And I think it's key reason why we don't have many people happy in our workplaces, because we're pitting them against each other. So,
you're constantly comparing people to each other. So is it about then knowing, and like this is something I think that certainly when I worked in corporate, it wasn't something that we necessarily talked about, but knowing each other's strengths, knowing what each other is good at, and playing to each other's strengths and working as a team. So as we were saying at the start, Gillian, if you're great at doing the big picture stuff and not necessarily the down into the details and the spreadsheets and the data, which is what I would be happy doing, and we work together, is that kind of what you see as more the future? That's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Stop trying to make people something they're not, because what happens then is they, you and I doing an Excel spreadsheet, you'll probably have it done in 20 minutes. It'll take me about 2 hours. I'll be exhausted after it. It won't be as good as yours, and I'm just saying,
it's been a waste of your time.
And it's, that's not the way I'm doing. And plus, I wasn't hired for that. If you're say hired as chief people officers to look after people, make sure they're okay, checking in with them, and it requires a different skill set. So why do that? Why try and push people constantly over to an area that they're not winning it? And it was actually when I was at an offsite for Workvivo, and it was just revolutionary, because the CEO just turned around and said, oh, well, don't get so-and-so to do that because they don't like that. So get Tommy, or whatever the guy's name was, to do that, and let them do X. And I was like, oh my God, amazing.
Very refreshing.
So refreshing. It's just, no, they don't like that, so we'll move them onto that, and there's no, and therefore that person doesn't feel inadequate or feel I'm not good at this, and it's hard to get good at something you don't enjoy.
Exactly.
Of course, I can head off and do advanced Excel and everything, but I'll be crawling down the attic stairs after it, you know?
Yeah, energy completely spent.
Yeah.
Gillian, before we wrap things up, I'd love to get your views. So we talked kind of earlier about why engagement is important, the impact, some of the causes that people might become disengaged, and the impact that it has on the organisation. Any steps you think that organisations can put in place now, with it being the Great Resignation, with it being a candidates market? What can organisations do to try and re-engage their staff if they feel like they've maybe dropped the ball slightly? If some of the leaders, or if there's a leader that's listening and they feel this is an opportunity now, I can re-engage my staff, I've noticed that there's been a drop in engagement, what do you think they can do?
Well, I think the first thing they have to understand is that everything sort of pre-pandemic has to be ripped out and thrown away. I've seen a lot of organizations to try and operate half a hybrid, and but a hybrid in the same way they operated when they were all in the office, and vice versa. And hybrid's actually quite complicated, and it's actually nearly easier being fully remote or fully in the office. But hybrid is an interesting, it's a challenging one for organizations. But just understanding that everything you did in 2019 is now irrelevant and does not work, and you're going to have to do a complete overhaul of your engagement strategy. What I would say is communication is king. Absolutely imperative that leadership team are constantly communicating with their people and communicating in a purposeful way about where the business is going. The recent Gallup survey was saying that people are really, really interested in the organization, as in how proud they can be of their organization. So things like what we stand for and who we are and our mission, people are really questioning that now. So really important that organizations are tying in and showing people, yes, and that it's authentic, because we've all worked in organizations that say they're out to solve world hunger or do something. I'm not saying, I don't know whose vision that is, just by the way, but I'm saying, and then you're in and it's like, it doesn't add up at all.
They lied.
We're in. Yeah. And you're like, that doesn't make sense.
I've seen that, there's a term catfishing, and there was they used the term I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was like, it's company making all of these promises, and it's the equivalent of catfishing essentially. They make all of these promises. They basically lie in the interview process, on their website, in any of their descriptions, and then you get in there and you're like, oh, this is not what they said it was going to be at all.
So it has to be real, it has to be authentic, because people are in different headspace. So not only are they a little bit traumatized from the pandemic, they're also a lot more conscious, I think, because they had more time at home with their families, and family being not able to see, a wider family made them, I suppose, just a bit more, this is what's important in life. Yeah. So they're really, really assessing those things. So it has to be real, it has to be authentic, don't fake it, and communicate to the power of 10. And to be honest with you, and I know I work for Workvivo now, but at the time in the pandemic, I wasn't working for Workvivo, but it was a godsend, because we're able to do that, as in to communicate really regularly on the platform. And that's another thing that I think people need, as in you need a platform where you can do this communication, where you can do recognition.
Just kind of the informal check-ins and stuff as well.
Connect people, build community, because community is really important, because things like people have moved away from religion and people aren't around each other in housing estates. So the company has become very important as tribal for people. So they want to know that they're part of something. So
interestingly, that's exactly what I said yesterday is, religion previously was where we felt our sense of purpose, where we felt a sense of community. But that's diminished quite a lot here in Ireland. And now people are looking for that sense of community and sense of purpose elsewhere. Where else better than somewhere you spend 8 hours a day? It's through your work, and that's where you're going to get that.
And if you are hybrid or you're fully remote, you're going to have to use technology to enable that for you and to bring them together, So, I mean, technology is critical. There's going to have to be investments severely in people technology to bring people together, to create those communities, to create that belonging, and to open up communication to the employees. Open, democratized communication is key. They have to be able to say what's on their mind. They have to be able to communicate upwards. Communicating downwards now is nearly so 1990s, it's like,
it's more about listening to your employees than telling. So it's this coaching approach. So you're listening and you're asking the right questions and asking those powerful questions. Brilliant. I think that's a great place to end, Gillian. And the question I ask everyone is, what makes you happier at work?
My connection with the people that I work with. Actually, two things. Can I say two?
Yeah.
The relationships are really important to me, and that I can be my true self around them. Like if a very loud laugh, I'm, well, as I said, a little bit irreverent, and and I need to be that. I can't contain that, so that is my true self, and I need to be accepted. And I love being around people that love a good laugh and have great crack. But also I need to believe that what I'm doing is making a difference. The older I've gotten, now I'm 45, and that's really important because I have 3 beautiful children, and every day that I leave them, I need to know that the work I'm doing isn't just
it's important. It has meaning.
It's shoveling out PowerPoint or whatever. And my overall vision, or I suppose my reason for being myself, is to improve the workplace experience for everyone, like globally. I want to, through the work that I do, to try and help people, because I do think people are very sad at work, and I've been sad at work. And I've gotten up in the morning where I'm like, how am I going to get through this day? And that makes me really sad to think that people are in that place. So trying to highlight what's not working for people, trying to, socialize and make it okay to speak up and speak out about things to make things better for people. And thankfully I work for a company that's obviously doing
that
thing, and it's trying to improve things for people in a very authentic way. So
and that's why I set up my business to begin with, was because I had those I wouldn't have described it as sad. I probably would have used something a little bit stronger than that, to be honest. Experiences, some of the experiences I had at work, and that's what prompted me on this journey. Going, it's something I've been thinking about probably for 11 or 12 years. It's kind of been burning away in the background. Like, there has to be a different way to do things, and that's what got me on this journey now. Gillian, do you want to tell people a little bit more about how to connect with you, how to find out more about the work that Workvivo does? Fire away there, sharing socials or website, anything like that.
So as I said, I work for Workvivo, workvivo.com, log onto the website. It's a great employee experience app, and it was voted, as I said, number 1 on G2, which we're all ferociously proud about. So have a look.
Brilliant.
And it deals with a lot of the issues. It can be your digital heart of your organization. It covers off the comms, the recognition, and the belonging, and all the things that organizations are struggling with. But obviously, in tandem with that, you need good, authentic leadership leading it. The technology will certainly enable and go a long way in helping leadership teams and companies. And we're just along with Workvivo and myself, and we're trying to just improve the workplace experience for everybody. So hopefully it's a good movement, and we're all getting behind it to improve things for people.
Definitely. Absolutely love that mission. Thank you so much for your time today, Gillian. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. Really good, and well done on all your success as well.
Thank you.